I never expected to walk into my own public execution on a random Tuesday evening, but that's exactly what Madison had orchestrated. I left work early that afternoon around 4:30 instead of my usual 6 SOAS because I'd finished the quarterly project timeline reviews ahead of schedule at my construction management firm in downtown Austin. We'd been swamped with 3 major residential developments in Cedar Park and Round Rock, and I'd spent the morning coordinating with subcontractors, reviewing architectural plans, and updating budget projections for our biggest client, Pinnacle Properties. The Meadowbrook subdivision alone was a $12 million project with 47 custom homes, and keeping everything on schedule required constant communication between electricians, plumbers, framers, and the city planning department. My promotion to senior project manager had just come through that morning. A call from regional director Tom Bradford confirming the position with a $25,500 annual increase, bringing my salary to $110,500. It represented 5 years of grinding through project deadlines, managing difficult contractors, and proving I could handle multiple developments simultaneously without missing delivery dates or going over budget. I grabbed a bottle of Woodford Reserve from the liquor store on South Lamar, the good stuff at 120, thinking we'd celebrate together. This wasn't just any Tuesday evening. This was supposed to be the night I surprised Madison with news that would change our financial trajectory completely. The raise meant we could finally start looking at houses in Westlake, or maybe even put money toward that lake house near Canyon Lake she'd been mentioning. When I pulled into our driveway in Cedar Park at 5:15, I noticed 4 unfamiliar cars parked along the street. A white BMW, a red Jeep Wrangler, a silver Lexus, and a blue Honda Accord, none of them belonging to neighbors I recognized. Our street usually stayed pretty quiet on weekday afternoons, with most folks still at work or picking up kids from school. I grabbed the bourbon and walked through our front door, expecting the usual quiet. Madison typically worked from home on Tuesdays, handling client calls for her event coordination business, reviewing vendor contracts, or visiting potential wedding venues around the Austin area. She'd been building her client base steadily over the past 2 years, specializing in high-end weddings for couples willing to spend $30,000 to $60,000 on their perfect day. Instead, I walked into what felt like a stage performance. Madison stood in the center of our living room, surrounded by 5 of her closest friends from her book club: Courtney, Danielle, Kristen, Michelle, and Samantha, all holding champagne flutes like they were at some kind of event. The book club had been meeting monthly for about 3 years, rotating between different houses, supposedly discussing literary fiction, but mostly gossiping about neighborhood, drama, and sharing relationship complaints. The furniture had been rearranged, our coffee table pushed back, chairs positioned in a semicircle facing the entrance like an audience configuration. Our normally cozy living room, decorated with photos from our Cabo honeymoon and family gatherings, suddenly felt like a theater set designed for maximum dramatic impact. Her friends stared at me with expressions I'd never seen before, this mixture of pity and anticipation that looked disturbingly like entertainment. Courtney held her phone at an angle that suggested recording, while Danielle and Kristen exchanged meaningful glances like they were watching a movie they had already seen. "Austin," Madison said, her voice unnaturally loud, projecting like she was addressing a crowd instead of 6 people in a living room. "I'm so glad you're finally home. We need to talk about something important." I set the bourbon on the entry table and looked around, trying to understand what I'd walked into. The champagne suggested celebration, but Madison's expression was performing crisis. She wore the black dress she usually saved for client meetings, her makeup more dramatic than normal, hair styled like she was attending an event rather than spending a Tuesday afternoon at home. "I've been doing a lot of soul-searching lately," she continued, pausing after each phrase for her audience to react with sympathetic nods. "And I've realized that I've been suffocating in this marriage, losing myself piece by piece, compromising who I am to fit into this life we've built." She gestured around our living room like it was a prison rather than the house we'd spent 2 years renovating together. We'd knocked out the wall between the kitchen and living room, installed new hardwood floors, updated all the fixtures, and painted every room according to color schemes Madison had spent weeks selecting from design magazines. "I need space to breathe, to rediscover the woman I was before I became just Austin's wife," before I let someone else's expectations define my entire existence. The irony hit me like a physical blow. Here I was carrying news of a promotion that represented financial freedom and expanded possibilities, while she performed this elaborate script about feeling trapped and constrained. I stood there processing not the content, but the delivery. This was clearly scripted, with strategic pauses timed for maximum impact. Her friends reacted on cue, gasping when she mentioned suffocation, nodding when she talked about losing herself. Samantha even wiped away a tear, though I'd never seen her display genuine emotion about anything more serious than parking difficulties at the country club. "I think we need to take a break," Madison said, building to her planned crescendo. "A serious break where we both figure out what we really want, because I can't keep pretending everything is fine when I'm dying inside every single day." She looked at me expectantly, waiting for me to break down, to beg, to give her the dramatic reaction that would validate whatever story she'd constructed. Her friends leaned forward, phones positioned like they were recording, everyone waiting for me to play my assigned role in this carefully orchestrated theater. But standing there watching this woman I'd been married to for 5 years perform my public humiliation for an audience she'd carefully assembled, something inside me went completely cold and clear. I didn't feel anger or heartbreak, just absolute clarity that I was watching someone reveal who they actually were. The same analytical mind that helped me coordinate construction timelines and manage project budgets kicked into gear. This wasn't an emotional breakdown or a spontaneous relationship crisis. This was a calculated performance with specific objectives. Madison had chosen the timing, assembled her audience, rehearsed her lines, and arranged the furniture for optimal staging. I reached down and removed my wedding ring, the simple gold band I'd worn since our ceremony at Zilker Park 5 years ago, and walked past her frozen audience to set it deliberately on the coffee table. "Consider yourself free," I said quietly. Nothing theatrical, just fact. The words hung in the air like a judge's verdict. No pleading, no emotional outburst, no desperate attempts to salvage whatever this was supposed to be. Just acknowledgement and finality. Then I turned and walked back toward the door, picked up my briefcase, left the Woodford Reserve sitting there like an abandoned celebration, and headed to my car. Behind me, complete silence. No laughter, no applause, nothing. Just stunned quiet where Madison's cruel victory party was supposed to bloom. I didn't look back as I pulled out of the driveway. Didn't see her face or her friends' reactions. She'd wanted a performance that would leave me destroyed and elevate her status as the liberated woman escaping a boring marriage. But instead, she got my complete, calm, final exit from whatever game she thought we were playing. I drove to a Marriott in downtown Austin, barely registering the route I took or the traffic around me. The familiar landmarks, the state capitol building, the university campus, the Colorado River bridges, passed by like scenery from someone else's life. My mind was replaying the evening's events through an entirely different lens, now that shock was transforming into analytical clarity. The breakup wasn't just public, it was weaponized, designed specifically to strip me of dignity while elevating Madison's status as the liberated woman, escaping what she'd surely described to everyone as a suffocating marriage. But victims don't choreograph their liberation with champagne and camera phones. Predators do. I checked into a basic room with a view of the downtown skyline and sat on the edge of the bed, finally letting myself think through what I'd actually witnessed. Her friends' phones had been strategically positioned, I realize now, probably recording the entire scene for social media circulation, for group chats, for whatever audience Madison wanted to perform, for beyond the 5 women in our living room. What disturbed me most wasn't the cruelty itself, but the planning it required. She'd chosen the specific timing, Tuesday evening, when I'd normally be home by 6 or 6. She'd assembled her audience, making sure all 5 book club members could attend on short notice. She'd rehearsed her lines, practiced her dramatic pauses, arranged the furniture for optimal staging. This wasn't an impulsive decision or an emotional breaking point. This was calculated theater, and I'd been cast as the villain who didn't even know there was a script. I ordered barbecue from Franklin's through the hotel concierge and started thinking about the past few months with this new understanding. Suddenly patterns emerged that I'd been too trusting or too focused on work to notice before. Madison had developed this sudden obsession with evening client meetings at odd hours, leaving for wedding venue consultations at 8 p.m. on weeknights when most vendors would be closed. When I'd asked about these unusual schedules, she'd explained that many venues preferred evening walkthroughs when they weren't hosting events, and that photographers often wanted to test lighting conditions during golden hour. Her explanations had made sense at the time. The wedding industry operated on weekends when most couples were free, so evening weekday meetings seemed reasonable for vendors trying to accommodate busy clients. I'd been proud of her growing business, impressed by her dedication to providing comprehensive service that included after-hours consultations. She'd bought new lingerie that I discovered by accident in the back of her drawer, still in shopping bags with tags attached, pieces she'd never worn around me. When I'd mentioned finding them, she'd said they were for a bachelorette party photo shoot she was coordinating, a part of her expanded services for high-end clients who wanted professional documentation of every wedding-related event. Again, the explanation had seemed plausible. Her business model included comprehensive event coordination, from engagement parties through honeymoon planning, so professional photography services would naturally expand her market reach. There were unexplained charges on our credit card to restaurants we'd never visited together. Places like Uchi, Barton G, Jeffries, upscale establishments around Austin that would fit her client entertainment budget. Nothing huge, always under $150, easy to overlook individually, but adding up to a pattern when I thought about it now. She'd also started this weird habit of turning her phone face down on every surface, something she'd never done in 5 years of marriage. Madison had always been casual about phone privacy, leaving it unlocked on counters, asking me to check messages while she was driving, sharing funny texts from clients or friends. I remembered one evening about 6 weeks ago when I'd picked it up to hand it to her, and she'd practically lunged across the couch to snatch it from me, then laughed it off as being startled. She'd explained that she had confidential client information in her messages now, wedding details that required professional discretion, and she was trying to develop better privacy habits to protect her business reputation. Every explanation had been reasonable, professional, perfectly logical for someone building an event coordination business in a competitive market. But now, sitting in a downtown hotel room with the taste of betrayal fresh in my mouth, I realized how masterfully she'd been constructing plausible cover stories for months. Over the next 10 days, I transformed our shared home office into a war room, methodically gathering evidence while Madison believed I was simply moved out to process things like she'd apparently been telling people. I texted her on day 3 that I needed time and space, keeping communication minimal and businesslike, which she seemed perfectly happy with based on her brief responses. Meanwhile, I took a week of vacation time from the firm, telling my supervisor I needed to handle some personal matters. The timing worked perfectly since we were between major project phases. The Meadowbrook framing was complete, and electrical rough-in wouldn't start for another week, giving me freedom to focus entirely on understanding exactly what my marriage had actually been. I started with our shared cloud storage, approaching it like a forensic audit. My construction management experience had taught me to document everything, maintain detailed records, and follow paper trails when contractors tried to hide cost overruns or schedule delays. Those same skills proved invaluable for investigating a cheating wife. Madison had been remarkably sloppy with digital security. Her laptop automatically synced to all our shared devices, including the iPad I'd set up for her business use that she rarely touched, but never disconnected from our family account. Text messages appeared in Dropbox, complete and undeleted, revealing a 4-month affair with someone named Brian Walsh. Brian Walsh turned out to be a wedding photographer who'd been collaborating with Madison on events since January. His Instagram showed the typical artistic shots, romantic couples in golden light, elaborate reception details, emotional ceremony moments, but cross-referencing his posts with Madison's calendar revealed a disturbing pattern. Every venue consultation or vendor meeting Madison had attended in the past 4 months corresponded with days Brian had posted photos from wedding shoots around Austin. She wasn't meeting clients during those evening hours. She was meeting him, using legitimate business collaboration as cover for their affair. The text messages were explicit in ways that made my stomach turn, not because of the sexual content, but because of how they mocked me. He actually thinks I'm at a venue walkthrough. One message read, followed by laughing emojis. "Austin's so clueless it's almost sad," another said. "He made dinner tonight like nothing's wrong. I literally can't." But the most damaging evidence came from their planning conversations. "Tuesday works perfectly," Madison had texted Brian 2 weeks before the breakup performance. "Book club girls will love the drama. Austin always comes home around 6 on Tuesdays, so timing will be perfect." Brian's response revealed the calculated nature of their scheme. "You sure about the public thing? Seems cruel even for you." Madison's reply chilled me. "He deserves it for being so predictable. Besides, I need witnesses that I tried to end things respectfully. Covers me in divorce court." I took screenshots of everything, organized by date, creating a comprehensive timeline that stretched back to January. Her calendar told an even clearer story. Entries labeled venue consultations and vendor meetings and book club corresponded exactly with hotel check-ins I found through credit card statements. She'd been using our joint card for some of these encounters, not even trying to hide the charges, probably figuring I never looked at statements closely since I trusted her to manage her own business expenses. The Omni Austin appeared 6 times, the 4 Points Sheraton 3 times, the Hampton Inn twice, always on weekday afternoons, always for 3 to 4 hours, always charged to our joint account. I found Venmo transactions too, payments to Brian Walsh with captions like photography session and creative consultation that totaled $2,100 over 4 months. But when I cross-referenced the dates with actual wedding events Madison had coordinated, half of those payment dates didn't correspond with any real client work. She'd been funding his equipment purchases, I realized, paying for his camera lenses and editing software, while telling me her increased expenses were for growing her business. The financial manipulation went deeper than simple affair funding. She'd been systematically transferring money from our joint savings into a separate account under her name only. Using my construction project budget tracking skills, I mapped out $12,500 in transfers over 6 months, moving $600 to $900 every few weeks, in amounts small enough to avoid triggering banking alerts, but substantial enough to build a secret nest egg. Money that was supposed to fund our lake house down payment was instead financing her exit strategy. The most damning evidence came from voice memos I found buried in her phone backup. She'd recorded herself practicing the breakup speech, multiple versions of it, trying out different phrasings and emphasis like an actress rehearsing for an audition. "I've been suffocating," she said in one take, then stopped and laughed. "God, that sounds so dramatic, but he'll buy it." In another recording, she was workshopping different emotional approaches. Should I cry during the speech, or save tears for afterwards when he hopefully breaks down? The most disturbing recording was a conversation with Brian, strategizing the whole performance. "I'm thinking Tuesday," she said. "Courtney and the girls can come over. We'll have champagne, make it like a celebration. He'll walk into it perfectly timed." Brian's voice in the background expressed some hesitation. "Seems like overkill. Can't you just tell him privately?" Madison's response revealed her true nature. "Where's the fun in that? He's going to look so pathetic. I almost feel bad, but honestly, he deserves it for being so boring and predictable." I sat in our home office listening to my wife rehearse my humiliation, and I felt something I'd never experienced before. Not heartbreak or anger, but clinical detachment, like I was reviewing evidence for a client's legal case rather than my own life. The woman I'd married, the woman I'd trusted with our finances and our future, had spent months planning not just to leave me, but to destroy me publicly while hiding assets and building her own financial foundation. This wasn't a marriage ending. It was a systematic con job reaching its planned conclusion. I compiled everything into organized folders on an external drive, creating multiple backup copies stored in different locations, like I'd learned to do with critical project documentation. Then, I called a divorce attorney my colleague had recommended, a guy named Carlos Rodriguez, who supposedly handled high-conflict cases involving financial fraud and asset concealment. Carlos practiced family law from a downtown office near the courthouse, specializing in cases where one spouse had systematically deceived the other about money, affairs, or both. His reputation among construction industry guys was solid. He'd helped 3 different project managers I knew navigate divorces where their wives had hidden assets or cheated with contractors. I sent him the evidence package before our consultation, uploading everything to his secure client portal, Text message screenshots, voice recordings, bank statements, hotel receipts, Venmo transactions, calendar entries, even photographs from Brian's Instagram that showed him at locations Madison claimed to be conducting business meetings. When we met in his conference room 3 days later, Carlos looked at me with something like professional admiration mixed with sympathy. "This is incredibly thorough documentation," he said, reviewing the files on his laptop. "Honestly, it's some of the best evidence compilation I've seen in 15 years of practice. Your wife's attorney is going to have nightmares when they see this." "What does that mean practically?" I asked. "It means you're going to come out of this divorce very favorably," Carlos explained. "Texas is a community property state, but infidelity still matters in asset division, spousal support determinations, and character assessments. With this evidence, she has zero leverage, none." Carlos outlined the strategy. Rather than immediately exposing Madison, we'd let her think she was winning, let her get comfortable with whatever narrative she was building around town. "The harder she commits to lies," he advised, "the worse the collapse will be when we present truth." I started monitoring Madison's social media activity and discovered she'd been portraying herself as the victim of a controlling husband, gaining sympathy and social capital from our entire community. Her Instagram stories showed her finding herself again, taking yoga classes, enjoying girls' nights, posting inspirational quotes about breaking free from toxic patterns. Our neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, had shared one of Madison's posts on Facebook about supporting women who find the courage to leave difficult situations. Courtney from the book club posted an article about emotional manipulation in marriages with a comment about finally seeing the truth about some people. Madison had even started a blog called Reclaiming My Authentic Self, where she posted vague but damning accusations about being controlled and diminished, carefully avoiding specific details that could be disproven, but painting a picture of me as some kind of oppressive presence in her life. "He monitored my spending," one post read, "made me account for every business expense like I was a child asking for allowance. I'd literally never questioned a single purchase she made until discovering thousands going to her affair partner. He isolated me from friends," another claimed, "made me feel guilty for having my own social life separate from him. I'd actively encouraged her book club and girls' nights, had never once complained about her going out, had even driven her to events when she'd had too much wine. The rewriting of our history was comprehensive and strategic. She was building a public case for her victim status while privately planning my financial destruction." Carlos advised patience. "Let her dig the hole deeper. Every lie she tells publicly makes our evidence more powerful." 2 weeks after the initial breakup performance, Madison texted me, asking if I'd be willing to attend a closure dinner at the Capitol Grill in downtown Austin. "I think we both deserve proper closure," her message said, "a chance to end things with dignity and respect for what we once had." I saw the trap immediately. Another performance, another audience, another opportunity for her to publicly demonstrate her magnanimous attempt at civilized resolution, while I presumably broke down and begged for reconciliation. But Carlos thought it was the perfect opportunity to turn her own theatrical strategy against her. "She's expecting you to play the desperate ex-husband role," he said. "Instead, we're going to give her an education in consequences." I spent 2 days preparing leather-bound folders containing complete evidence packages, printed photos, bank statements, text message transcripts, timeline documentation, voice recording transcripts, and financial analysis reports. Everything time-stamped, everything cross-referenced, everything presented with the same professional organization I'd use for a major construction project proposal. I had 6 folders professionally bound at a print shop, each containing identical evidence packages that would speak for themselves. No emotional appeals, no dramatic confrontations, just documented truth presented with clinical precision. The night before the dinner, I called my brother Jake in Dallas to let him know what was happening. "You sure about this public exposure thing?" he asked. "Seems like it could backfire." "She chose public humiliation as her weapon," I replied. "I'm just returning the favor with better ammunition." I arrived at the Capitol Grill at 7 p.m. on Thursday, wearing the same Navy suit I'd worn to close the Meadowbrook contract, carrying my briefcase like I was attending a business meeting rather than a personal confrontation. The hostess directed me to the private dining area Madison had reserved, and I walked into exactly what I'd expected. Her book club friends were already seated: Courtney, Danielle, Kristen, Michelle, and Samantha, wearing expressions of supportive solidarity, clearly briefed on whatever narrative Madison had prepared. The table was set with wine glasses and appetizers, lighting dim and intimate, suggesting careful staging for whatever performance Madison had planned. Madison sat at the head of the table, like a queen holding court, wearing the black dress she'd worn for the original Breakup performance, makeup and hair styled for maximum dramatic impact. She'd probably told them this would be their chance to witness Austin Pierce's final emotional breakdown, his desperate attempts to save a marriage she'd already publicly declared dead. Instead, they were about to get an education in what happens when you underestimate someone who builds things for a living. Before Madison could launch into whatever speech she'd rehearsed, I reached into my briefcase and pulled out 6 leather folders I'd had professionally bound, each containing a complete evidence package with printed photos, bank statements, text message transcripts, and timeline documentation. "I brought some things to share," I said calmly, distributing a folder to each person at the table, including Madison. The room went silent as they opened the folders. I watched their faces cycle through confusion, shock, and horror as they processed what they were reading. The first page contained a timeline showing Madison's affair activities, cross-referenced with her public statements about our marriage. The second page showed bank transfers totaling $12,500 moved to her secret account. Courtney went pale reading text messages where Madison called her useful but tedious, the kind of friend you keep around because she makes you look better by comparison. Danielle discovered messages where Madison had been fabricating stories about her financial problems to create social drama she could later exploit for sympathy. Kristen found herself described as desperate for relevance, clinging to youth through other people's drama. Michelle stared at financial records showing Madison had used their joint credit card to fund hotel rooms for her affair. Samantha read explicit conversations with Brian about timing the Breakup performance for maximum audience impact. Each woman was discovering how Madison actually viewed them, not as friends, but as props in her carefully constructed narrative, useful idiots who could be manipulated into providing social validation for whatever story she wanted to tell. "Madison, you told us Austin controlled all the finances," Kristen said quietly, holding up bank statements. "But these show you had full access and were transferring thousands to a separate account." Danielle's voice shook as she read from the text messages. "You said you needed to leave because Austin was emotionally unavailable. You never mentioned an affair." Madison's face went from confident to panicked as she scrambled through her folder, trying to find some explanation that could overcome documented evidence. "This is out of context," she started, but I cut her off. "Everything is dated and time-stamped. The timeline speaks for itself." I pulled out my phone, connected it to a portable speaker, and played the audio file, Madison's voice memo, practicing her breakup speech, including cruel jokes about my predictability and earning potential. "He's so boring," her recorded voice said, followed by laughter. "I swear he thinks love means showing up and being reliable. Like, that's enough. Brian makes me feel alive. Austin makes me feel like I'm already married to my grandfather." The restaurant manager quietly moved other diners away from our section, recognizing the situation's volatility. Other patrons were starting to stare as Madison's friends processed the magnitude of her deception. When the recording ended, silence was absolute. 5 women sat staring at someone they thought they knew, realizing they'd been played as thoroughly as I had. Worse, they'd participated in my public humiliation based on lies Madison had carefully constructed. "I'm happy to provide copies of everything to anyone who wants them," I said, standing up from the table. The security footage from hotels, witness statements from neighbors, the forensic accounting report showing financial fraud. It's all documented and verified. I left $200 on the table. That should cover my portion of dinner. Then I picked up my briefcase and looked at Madison directly. "You wanted a performance. You wanted an audience. You wanted to destroy me publicly while hiding what you'd actually been doing. So here's your performance, the truth, documented and witnessed by the same people you used to humiliate me." I walked toward the exit, and behind me I heard nothing but stunned silence. No one defended Madison. No one called after me. In the window reflection, I caught a glimpse of Madison sitting frozen at the table, surrounded by friends who were now looking at her like strangers, unable to construct any lie that could overcome documented truth. The divorce proceedings moved with surprising speed once Madison's attorney reviewed the evidence package Carlos sent over. We met in his conference room 4 weeks after the restaurant confrontation, and Madison looked completely different. No makeup, hair pulled back carelessly, wearing jeans instead of her usual curated outfits. Her attorney did most of the talking while Madison stared at the table. The settlement was straightforward and brutal for her. She got to keep her event planning business, but owed me spousal support for 2 years due to the affair destroying the marriage. The $12,500 she'd hidden had to be returned and split evenly. She kept her car, personal belongings, and her credit card debt. Brian abandoned her within a week of the restaurant incident. According to mutual friends, once the money stopped and things became publicly messy, he disappeared completely, blocked her everywhere, and moved on to targeting someone new at a different venue. The predator had found easier prey. Madison's social circle evaporated overnight. Her friends wanted nothing to do with her after seeing how she actually viewed them. Her blog disappeared. Her Instagram went private, then inactive. I heard through neighborhood gossip that she'd moved back with her parents in San Antonio, taking a retail job because her reputation in the Austin event planning industry was destroyed. 6 months after the divorce finalized, my firm offered me a senior position in their Dallas office, a promotion with a significant raise and complete geographical fresh start. I accepted without hesitation. Dallas was barbecue and live music and big sky, a city where no one knew my story unless I chose to tell it. I bought a small condo in Deep Ellum, joined a gym where I actually worked out, and started exploring the city on weekends. 8 months into Dallas life, I met Isabella Santos at a company networking event, a senior architect with a direct way of speaking that reminded me honesty could be refreshing. "So, what's your story?" Isabella asked during our third dinner. "Everyone's got one." I told her an abbreviated version: married young, didn't work out, divorced, moved for a fresh start. I didn't mention the public humiliations or evidence folders. Not because I was hiding anything, but because that story didn't define me anymore. A year after the divorce, I realized I'd gone an entire week without thinking about Madison once. That felt like the real milestone.